Good morning, everybody. First of all, let me thank Dr. Sudhakar for inviting me to deliver this particular webinar. The title of my talk is Eigenvalues, Perron theorems, and their applications. Eigenvalue, the concept that is well known for you. Still, I like to discuss a bit on the same thing. The contents of my talk are as in the following. Starting with the preliminaries, I'll continue with describing eigenvalues and eigenvectors, then singular values for any rectangular matrices, then Perron-Frobenius theorem for non-negative matrices of size n by n, and applications of all these, particularly Perron's theorem in ranking and Perron-Frobenius theory in population dynamics. Okay. So the abstract is as in the following. In this talk, we emphasize on the concept of eigenvalues, singular values, and Perron theorem with their interpretation and applications in the different field of science. So notations are given here. The first, this R is meant for real numbers. This C is for complex numbers. M by n matrices are denoted by this particular notation. So n-dimensional real vector space is denoted by Rn. And for any m by n matrix, A, this A to the power T stands for transpose of A. This C of A stands for column space of A. And this R of A for column space of A transpose are simply row space of A. So this rank of A is simply the column rank of matrix A. So the definition of eigenvalues are given here. Given an n by n matrix, a square matrix, over the field of real numbers or complex numbers, the characteristic polynomial is the polynomial of degree n with variable lambda given by determinant of A minus lambda I. Note that this A minus lambda I is n by n matrix and lambda is appearing along the diagonal. So the determinant of A minus lambda I is a polynomial of degree n. If P of lambda is the determinant of A minus lambda I, the characteristic equation is given by P of lambda is equal to 0. You are equating that one to 0. Okay, that is the characteristic equation of A is given by determinant of A minus lambda I equal to 0. The roots of characteristic equations of square matrix A is called eigenvalues of A. It is also called characteristic values. In other words, lambda is said to be an eigenvalue of A if there exists a vector x not equal to 0 such that Ax minus lambda x. Look at this situation. If lambda is a eigenvalue, then the determinant of A minus lambda is 0. Then for that particular value of lambda, A minus lambda is singular matrix. That means it is not invertible. So null space has at least one non-zero vector. So eigenvector exists. Okay. Such a vector x is called eigenvector of A corresponding to the eigenvalue lambda. Take this example to play with and understand about eigenvector, eigenvalue to begin with. A is 0, 1, 3, 2. Take A minus lambda I and its determinant and equate that one to 0. You get minus lambda into 2 minus lambda minus 3 is equal to 0. So you simplify this, get a polynomial of degree 2 in lambda, and find its roots, you will find lambda is equal to -1 or 3. Thus, the eigenvalues of A are -1 and 3. There are two distinct eigenvalues. In general, these eigenvalues need not be distinct. The number of times an eigenvalue lambda occurs as a root of the characteristic equation is called the algebraic multiplicity of lambda. Here is an example. Consider this 3 by 3 matrix A, okay, with the -1, 0, 1, 0, 5, 1, 1, 0, 1. You take determinant of A minus lambda I and equate that one to 0. Equate that one to 0. You have polynomial lambda square into 5 minus lambda is equal to 0, which implies lambda is 0, or it could be 0 again and 5. That means 0 appears twice. Hence, 0 is an eigenvalue of A with the multiplicity 2. If lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n are the eigenvalues of n by n matrix A, then we can factor the characteristic polynomial as determinant of A minus lambda I equal to lambda 1 minus lambda into lambda 2 minus lambda into so on into lambda n minus lambda. So on the left hand side, if you put lambda is equal to 0, you get determinant A. Here lambda 1 into lambda 2 into lambda n, that is in fact the constant part of the polynomial. Okay, so the constant part of this polynomial is nothing but the determinant of A. Okay, that is nothing but simply the product of eigenvalues. By equating the coefficient of lambda to the power n minus 1 on the left hand side, you can see that the coefficient of this lambda to the power n minus 1 is simply lambda 1 plus lambda 2 plus lambda n. Okay, the sum of eigenvalues. That is in fact here on this side, when you look into the same term, the coefficient of lambda to the power n happen to be the sum of the diagonal entries. So the trace of A is nothing but sum of eigenvalues of A. Now let me define orthogonal matrix. A square matrix P is said to be an orthogonal if the inverse of P is P transpose. Okay. That is to say that P into P transpose is equal to P transpose into P is equal to identity matrix. Now let us look into some interesting lemma which you may not have encountered so far, but it is quite useful in deriving spectral theorem in completely different manner. Now consider a symmetric matrix A of size n by n and unit eigenvector V correspond to the eigenvalue alpha. Then consider the matrix B is equal to alpha into V transpose. Alpha is scalar, V is column vector, and V transpose is row. So you get n by n matrix here. Okay. It satisfies the following properties. B is a matrix of rank 1 such that A into B equal to B into A is equal to B square. And rank of A is equal to rank of B plus rank of C, where C is equal to A minus B. So proof is quite interesting. Okay. Since V is an eigenvector of A, we have that A of V is equal to alpha V. Therefore, AB into BA is equal to B square, isn't it? Because here B is of the form V into V transpose. AV is equal to alpha times V. Therefore, AB is equal to B square. You can just check the same thing on your paper. Okay. Similarly, BA, that is equal to, since here A is symmetric, so that fact is used. So BA is again found to be B square. From the definition of this particular B, we have range of B is inside range of A. Why? Eigenvector is part of range of A or column space of A. Therefore, column space of B is contained in column space of A. And therefore, range of C, that is A minus B, is again included in the range of A. Since A and B are symmetric, here by construction of B, it is clearly symmetric. A is given as symmetric. So both A and B are symmetric. So is C. Therefore, B into C is equal to C into B equal to 0 implies column space of B or range of B is perpendicular to range of C. And therefore, range of B and range of C are having 0 intersection, and we have direct sum of range of B and range of C given as range of A. Therefore, rank of A is equal to rank of B plus rank of C. Okay. So this is going to be quite useful in deriving spectral theorem. Now, let us consider any n by n symmetric matrix. Then there exists an orthogonal matrix P such that P transpose AP is equal to diagonal lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n, where lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n are eigenvalues of A. Proof is given by induction, okay? Induction on the rank, in fact. If the rank of A is 1 with the eigenvalue lambda 1, then the eigenvector V, then A is of the form lambda 1 into U1 into U1 transpose. This can be observed very easily. Here matrix A is of rank 1 and its column space contains the vector this V, and you can check carefully and observe that A is of this particular form, lambda 1 into U1 into U1 transpose. Here U1 is nothing but 1 by norm of V into V. Now extend this U1 to an orthonormal basis. You can use Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization process and find that U1, U2, UN as orthonormal basis of Rn. Now construct a matrix U by taking U1, U2, UN as columns in the same order. Clearly, U transpose equal to U transpose U, that is equal to identity. Okay, so this U is orthogonal matrix, and this A is nothing but this U into the diagonal matrix lambda 1, rest are zeros, into U transpose. Okay, if you check this one carefully, this is nothing but this lambda 1 into the first column of U into first row of this U. That is nothing but lambda 1 into U1, U1 transpose. Okay. So the theorem holds when rank of A is 1. Suppose that the theorem holds for all matrices, in fact symmetric matrices of rank R minus 1. If A is a symmetric matrix of rank R, then choose an eigenvalue lambda1 of A with corresponding unit eigenvector U1 as in the earlier lemma. Okay, the earlier lemma. Okay. Now construct B is equal to lambda1 into U1 transpose, satisfying rank of A is equal to rank of B plus rank of C, and BC equal to CB is equal to 0. Okay. Since C is a symmetric matrix and rank of C is R minus 1 from the earlier lemma. Now, by induction, there exists an orthogonal matrix V such that C is equal to V into diagonal lambda 2, lambda 3, so on lambda R, then all are zeros into V transpose, where lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda R are the eigenvalues of C and the first R minus 1 columns of A, not A, V, are corresponding eigenvalues with the unit norm. Since BC into CB equal to 0, U1 into UR are eigenvectors correspond to the eigenvalues lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda R of C as well of A. For the same reason, the set of vectors U1 together with the first R minus 1 columns of columns U1, U2, UR of V form a set of orthonormal vectors. Extend this set of orthonormal vectors to form an orthonormal basis U1, U2 up to UR minus 1 up to UN of Rn. Now construct an orthogonal matrix U by using these orthonormal vectors, and from the definition of B and C, it is clear that A is given by U into diagonal lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda R 0, 0, 0 into U transpose. So this is a completely different proof of spectral theorem. If U1, U2, UN are the columns of U, then by the above theorem, it follows that A into U is equal to U into diagonal lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n. So that A UI is equal to lambda I UI. Here U1 into UN are nothing but the eigenvectors. Okay. Thus, U1, U2, Un are the eigenvectors corresponding to the eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n. Further, A is U into diagonal lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n into U transpose implies that A is in the form of lambda 1 times U1, U1 transpose. U1, U1 transpose is of rank 1 plus lambda 2 into U2, U2 transpose, and so on up to lambda n UN transpose. This decomposition is known as the spectral decomposition of A. Now consider this matrix A to play with, and let us find the spectral decomposition. This is a symmetric matrix. Okay, that must be in the form of Q into D into Q transpose, where D is a diagonal matrix and Q is orthogonal matrix. Okay, so consider A minus lambda I, substitute, and you find that determinant of 2 minus lambda 1, 1, 2 minus lambda is 0, and solve that polynomial, characteristic polynomial, you get that lambda is equal to 3 or 1. Eigenvector corresponding to eigenvalue lambda is equal to 3 is given by the null space of this particular matrix. Substitute lambda is equal to 3 here. You get minus 1, 1, 1, minus 1. x1, x2 is equal to 0. So the solution for this particular matrix equation is nothing but null space of this matrix, and you can see that a vector is 1, 1. Okay, so this is a vector in the null space, but we look for a unit vector. So take norm of this and multiply by 1 by of that particular norm, you get 1 by root 2, 1 by root. Eigenvector correspond to lambda 1 is given by minus 1 by root 2. So with the help of these two eigenvectors, okay, we can form the matrix U given by this. Here you have U1, here you have U2. Okay, here in the diagonal matrix you have eigenvalues. You will have to write this very carefully. So this must be the first entry in the diagonal must be the eigenvalue correspond to this particular eigenvector, and this one for the second one. Okay, so this is a spectral decomposition of matrix A. Now we can get introduced to singular values with the help of spectral decomposition theorem. Now consider any n by n symmetric matrix. Such a symmetric matrix is said to be positive definite if for any non-zero x in the vector space Rn, x transpose Ax is always greater than 0. The matrix A is said to be positive semi-definite if x transpose Ax is greater than or equal to 0 for all x belongs to R. Okay. For m by n matrix A, now it is not square matrix. A is any m by n matrix. The singular values of A are defined to be the eigenvalues of AA transpose to the power half. The singular values are always non-negative since AA transpose is a positive semi-definite matrix, and we denote them by sigma 1 of A greater than or equal to sigma 2 of A in the decreasing order. Sigma n of A is the least one. Okay, or simply sigma 1 greater than or equal to sigma 2 greater than or equal to sigma n. We also call this as spectrum of whenever we have set of eigenvalues of positive definite matrix in the decreasing order, we call it as spectrum. Here, of course, we have m by n rectangular matrix. Consider this particular example. A is 3, 2, 1, 3. Okay. Consider A transpose and find its eigenvectors and eigenvalues. So here 2 and square root of 22 are eigenvalues, and singular values of A are sigma 1 is equal to 2 and sigma 2 is square root of 22. But if you want to keep our practice is to keep them in a decreasing order. So in such a case, we'll have to keep the square root of 22 in the beginning and 2 later. Here, I'll just describe singular value decomposition without proof. I'm not going to cover the proof here. Given an m by n matrix A, there exist orthogonal matrices U and V such that A is U into diagonal sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma R, 0, 0, the rest, into V transpose. Note that this diagonal matrix is not a square matrix. Okay, so it is simply m by n matrix depending on the size of A. Okay, here diagonal entries are nothing but the ith entries. Okay. So that is so you have a diagonal matrix of size m by n like this, and two orthogonal matrices U and V transpose on either side. Here sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n, sigma r are the singular values of A. Okay, so as we have done in the case of spectral theorem earlier, and using the same theorem, we can prove this particular singular value decomposition theorem. Okay, note this very carefully. This diagonal matrix, okay, that is m by n matrix, not a square matrix. Now, consider this m by n matrix, which is of rank R. It is clear that the matrix A transpose, that is of size m by m. Okay, A transpose is of size n by m. So when you multiply with the A, you get m by n matrix, and its rank is also R. Further, the eigenvalues of A transpose. Now A transpose is a positive semi-definite matrix, symmetric matrix. Okay, and eigenvalues are non-negative. Okay, let the eigenvalues of this particular positive definite matrix be sigma 1 square, sigma 2 square, sigma r square. Okay, since they are positive, we can consider them as a square of some positive numbers. Okay, consider the orthogonal unit vectors u1, u2, ur of AA transpose corresponding to these eigenvalues. Okay, from the spectral decomposition theorem, let us refer to that spectral decomposition theorem now. These are the eigenvalues of AA transpose. So there exist orthogonal matrices, orthogonal matrix P, such that P into diagonal matrix sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 1 square, sigma 2 square, sigma r square into P transpose, where P is the matrix obtained by taking orthogonal unit vectors u1, u2, ur as its columns. Note that P transpose P, that is the identity, and P transpose into AA transpose is equal to AA transpose. Okay, here I said P transpose P is identity, not PP transpose. Okay, here I have a rectangular matrix. Okay, it is with the R columns. Okay, n rows. Therefore, PP transpose, it is going to be an orthogonal projector matrix, not identity. Okay, so PP transpose into AA transpose, that is equal to AA transpose, which implies that PP transpose into A, that is equal to A. Now write this Vi is equal to 1 by sigma I into A transpose Ui. Okay, Ui is the ith eigenvector of A transpose. Now you are writing Vi by taking this Ui and pre-multiply by A transpose and 1 by sigma I. Now observe that A transpose A, Vi, okay? Earlier we had A transpose. Now you take A transpose A into Vi and observe that A transpose A, so your Vi is 1 by sigma I A transpose Ui, And now you have AA transpose. UI is eigenvector of AA transpose. Okay, so you simplify that one to see that the same equal to 1 by sigma I into A transpose into AA transpose UI. So this part is nothing but sigma I square UI. Okay, this is the eigenvector of this particular matrix correspond to sigma I square, and that is equal to sigma I square Vi from the definition of Vi. And therefore Vi are eigenvectors of A transpose A. You are with the eigenvectors of A transpose to get eigenvectors of A transpose A. Okay. Further, Vi are orthogonal unit vectors of vectors, and therefore V1, V2, Vr is a set of orthonormal vectors for Q obtained by taking V1, V2, Vr as its columns. We get A transpose A is equal to Q into D square into Q transpose. Okay, where D square is this. Okay. Now from the definition of Vi, it is clear that Q is equal to A transpose P into D inverse. Therefore, P into D into Q transpose, that is equal to P into D inverse P transpose A, that is equal to P into P transpose into A, so that is A. Now extend the matrices P and Q to the orthonormal matrices U and V by employing Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization process. Okay. Obtain this U and V and write A is equal to U into D0000 into V transpose. Now let us play with an example. Here A is the matrix 1 minus 2, 2 minus 1, 2 minus 2. If you look into this very carefully, we can see that it is of rank 1 because second row is minus 1 times the first row. Okay. And obtain A transpose. That is again a symmetric matrix and it is of rank 1, 9 minus 9 minus 9, 9. The eigenvalues of A transpose are 0 and 18. Okay, take sigma 1 square is equal to 18. So here consider D matrix given by this square root of 18. This is in fact 1 by 1 matrix, and U1 is equal to transpose of minus 1 by root 2, 1 by root 2. Okay. So V1 is equal to 1 by square root of 18 into A transpose U. That's how we defined V1. So by taking U1, we define by taking U1, we obtain V1, and it is simply transpose of 1 by 3 minus 2 by 3, 2 by 3. Okay. Now take U. Okay. How do we get this one? We are taking this U1 and by Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization process, extend the basis to obtain this U by taking 1 by root 2 minus 1 by root 2. This is your U1 and this is the U2 that we obtain 1 by square root of 2, 1 by square root of 2. And similarly, V is this particular matrix. Now U and V are orthogonal and A is given by this product U into D000 V transpose. Now we will move on to Perron's theorem. Before going to the Perron's theorem, we will have to get introduced to some interesting notions. To start with the primitive matrix. A real square matrix A of order n with non-negative entries is said to be primitive if for some p belongs to n set of natural numbers, a to the power p has only positive entries. A is with non-negative entries. It is square. Okay, you can find a square, a cube, so on. If a to the power p contains only positive entries, again check. Now a is with the non-negative entries, a square must have only non-negative entries, isn't it? So you continue. At some stage, if a to the power p has no zero entries, then we say that the matrix A is primitive. Otherwise, it is non-primitive. Now consider this particular matrix A given by this. It is simply 0, 1 matrix. Okay. Now look into this 0, 1 matrix. Okay. On the diagonal, you have non-zero entry here. Okay, no problem. Whenever you deal with a 0, 1 square matrix, you can associate that one with a graph, isn't it? So whenever that graph is connected, then it has got some interesting property. I'll discuss that one later. Okay. Now you consider the graph G correspond to the above adjacency matrix. Look into 0, 1 entries. Okay. Here there is a scope for this is not a simple graph. Okay, it can have parallel edges. Okay, and even at some stage it may have loop also. Here in this case you don't have loop. You consider this adjacency matrix and obtain a square, a cube, and continue. And then later you see that a to the power 7 has some zero entries, but a to the power 8 is with strictly non-zero entries. Okay, so it is a primitive matrix. A to the power 8 is with all positive entries. Now let us describe Perron's theorem. I am not going to prove it. I'll describe this particular theorem. Note that this theorem has been proved by Perron in 1907, in the beginning of last century, but it has got interesting applications in this particular century, and there are several results. Let A be a primitive matrix. Okay, that means it is a matrix with the non-negative entries and it is primitive, means a to the power p is strictly greater than 0 for some p, and rho of a is its spectral radius. This is the notation we use. The rho of a is for spectral radius. Then we have the following properties. Spectral radius, this rho of a is strictly greater than 0, and this rho of a is an eigenvalue of a with the multiplicity 1. What does that mean? This rho of a, that is positive, and also when you say that rho of a is spectral radius, the positive value, that rho of a need not be eigenvalue all the time. But in this case, when it is primitive, then this row of A is an eigenvalue and it is not going to repeat. Its multiplicity is algebraic multiplicity is 1. Okay? That is the first property. And left and right eigenvectors associated to this row of A are strictly positive. What do you mean by left eigenvalues and right eigenvalues? Right eigenvalue is the thing that you know, Ax is equal to lambda x. Left eigenvalue is on the other side. We transpose into A is equal to lambda times V transpose. Okay, such vector is called left eigenvector. Okay. So left and right eigenvectors associated to this row of A are strictly positive. That means the vectors have no zero entries. Okay. For any other eigenvalue lambda of A, the mod lambda is less than rho of A. You take any, that is because rho of A is spectral radius of A. So mod lambda has to be less than rho of A. Okay. Now we define reducible matrix and irreducible matrix. The notion of primitive matrix is further generalized. For the purpose, let's define reducible matrix first. A square matrix A of order n is said to be reducible. There is a typo, please excuse me. If there is a permutation matrix P such that A is equal to P into B C0D into P transpose, where B and D are square matrices. Okay. If you don't have such P to write A in this form, then it is called irreducible. If you look into this matrix carefully, B, C, 0D, where B and D are square matrix, you take, so ignore this P and take square. What happens? Then you get B square, B into C, 0, D square. Okay, continue. Even A cube, in this particular place, you remain with 0 and goes on. Okay, so what does that mean? If a non-zero entry anywhere here, say ijth entry of this, in flow from, then what does that mean? Now for I correspond to this position and j correspond to this column position, no flow at all. Okay, so you don't get non-zero entry at all. Okay, when our matrix is irreducible. So look into this adjacency matrix. If you have adjacency matrix correspond to this particular graph from any vertex, say from this V1 to any other vertex, say it is at a distance 2 here, you find walk of length 4k plus 2 only. Okay, therefore you take any a to the power k. Okay, unless this k is in the form of 4i plus 2, you don't find non-zero entry in the place of 1, this third, 1, 3 place of a to the power k. Okay, so this is adjacency matrix correspond to this one is not a primitive. but you can observe that it is irreducible because it is connected. Now we'll continue to, this is a Perron-Frobenius theorem. So this has been proved by Frobenius later in 1912. So it is called Perron-Frobenius theorem. So improvement upon Perron's theorem. That's why it's called Perron-Frobenius theorem. If A is a non-negative irreducible matrix, much more than primitive matrix, and rho of A is spectral radius, okay, then we have the following properties. Spectral radius of A is strictly greater than 0, and the same is an eigenvalue of A with the multiplicity 1. The right and left eigenvectors associated with the rho of A are strictly positive, and for any other eigenvalues lambda of A, the mod lambda is strictly less than this spectral radius of A. So earlier Perron proved it for only primitive matrix, and Perron proved extended this theorem for any non-negative irreducible matrix. And he also found several more interesting properties at later stage, and this theorem has been further generalized by different mathematicians, which can be seen in the literature. Okay, now we'll move on to the physical interpretation of the notions what we discussed so far, and also for some applications. Now let us look into the very preliminary notion of eigenvalues. This has got good applications in the field of engineering. Particularly the one that I'm handling now is from mechanical engineering. The eigenvalues and eigenvectors help us to translate a linear operation into a simpler problem. If a material is stretched or compressed, then the direction of maximum deformation is called principal direction. The following example that has been discussed in a linear algebra textbook written by Dr. Kenneth Cutler. Okay. So the same thing is presented here. Suppose a linear deformation of a material is determined by the matrix A is equal to so and so. So what is the understanding of this matrix? See, if there is a three-dimensional object and if you have the standard basis E1, E2, E3, then E1 is moved to vector of this direction. Okay, 29 by 11, 6 by 11, and 6 by 11. So 1, 0, 0 is moved to this particular vector. Similarly, 0, 1, 0 is moved to this vector. 0, 0, 1 moved to this one. So you get the matrix that determines the deformation. Okay. And look into this particular matrix and find its eigenvalues as we have done earlier. Eigenvalues are 0, 1 by 2, and 3. Since the largest eigenvalue among these three is 3, the principal direction of the stretch is in the direction of eigenvector associated with the eigenvalue 3. The corresponding unit eigenvector is found to be 3 by square root of 11, 1 by square root of 11, 1 by square root of 11. You can check. So this is a simple application or use of eigenvector. Okay. Now let us see how we can use this singular value decomposition. It has got some interesting application in image processing. Now consider a grayscale image. Every grayscale image can be represented by a matrix. Okay. Each entry of the matrix described by the intensity of the corresponding pixel. Okay. So in any entry you take, so that number describes the intensity of corresponding pixel. Current digital files use integer numbers between 0 and 255. 0 indicates black, the color of minimum intensity, and the 255 is white, the color of maximal intensity. Suppose that this A is a grayscale image of size 1000 by 1000, matrix of size 1000 by 1000. How many entries are there? 10 lakh or 1 million. Okay. Now this data has to be transferred from a satellite to a laboratory on Earth. Okay. So 10 million entries are to be transferred. I'm taking a simple case of image with 1000 by 1000 pixel. Okay. So many entries are to be sent. In principle, the satellite has to send 1 million number, one for each pixel. Okay. But using singular value decomposition, this number can be reduced. How is it? You take singular value decomposition of this A, write it in the form of U as V transpose. Okay. Then what is this A? As I mentioned earlier, it can be written as S11, the first entry in the diagonal matrix S, into U1 first vector into the first row vector here, U1 V1 transpose. Similarly, S22 into U2 V2 transpose and continue, add up to SKK UK VK transpose. Here, that is our practice. The singular values are written in the decreasing order. S11 is greater than or equal to S22, greater than or equal to S33, greater than or equal to SKK. Okay, the rest the diagonal entries could be 0. It is enough that the satellite sends, say, first 20 columns of U and V. 20 columns of U and V and 20 first numbers of SII. First 20 numbers of this S matrix. Okay. So how many entries are to be signed? So 20 by 1000. Okay. Here we consider 20 columns. Number of rows is 1000 as it was earlier in the spectral decomposition. Okay. So 20 columns are considered and 1000 rows of the same U are considered. So the total number of entries are 20 into 1000. Similarly, 20 rows of V are considered, 20 into 1000 entries and 20 entries of this S. So total 40,020. So instead of sending how many? 1000 into 1000 entries, we can send only this many. Okay. On receiving the data, the laboratory on the Earth finds the matrix S11 into U1 U1 transpose, so on. The last one is S20 into S2020 into U20 into V20 transpose. Okay, which gives an approximation of the original image. Here we are sacrificing lots of information. So what we do is, on many occasions, we'll ignore the entries which are close to zero with no hesitation, so that there will be lesser loss of information. Okay. Now, look into this image, what Earth receives. Okay. Suppose we consider just one singular value. That means the first column of U, first row of V, and the first eigenvalue is considered. Okay, first singular value is considered. Then we get this particular image. Okay, here in fact the actual image is supposed to be this one. When we consider all 499 singular values, okay, of that particular image. So when we consider 5, then there is improvement of the image that looks like this. When we consider 10, the first 10, so we get this image. For 20, we get this image, and for 50, somewhat better, very close to the better one. And mostly in this particular case, the rest of the eigenvalues after this first 50 are very close to zeros. Okay, so this particular image is almost close to the actual one. So this is how the singular value decomposition is useful in image processing. Now let us look into an application of this is an example came of the context. Let me cover this one also. Okay, this Moore-Penrose inverse is very closely related to the singular value decomposition. Suppose that we have an n-port network N with the impedance matrix Z. Okay, this is appearing in electrical engineering. Then V is equal to Zi. Okay, this V is called a voltage vector. Z is impedance matrix. I is input current. Suppose we want to produce a particular output V0, voltage vector V0. In that case, we would want to solve V0 is equal to Zi. Here V0 is known. We like to know what I should be used. If V0 doesn't belong to column space of Z, okay, then we must seek approximate solution. If V0 is in the column space of Z, then it has got multiple, maybe just one solution or even more. Otherwise, this particular linear system may not have solution. In such a case, what we like to have is a solution which is very close to the reality. Okay, very close to the requirement. This would be a least square problem. If Z plus is the Moore-Penrose inverse of Z, then Z plus V0 is the required approximate solution of the system. If you take any other solution, it won't be as close as that of this one. If you take any other I, okay, it won't be as close as in the case of this particular solution. Now, Let us have one more application of Moore-Penrose inverse. A method based on Moore-Penrose inverse matrix is applied for the removal of blur in an image caused by uniform linear motion. The following idea is discussed in a reference of application of Moore-Penrose inverse matrix in image deblurring. Let G be a R by M matrix corresponding to the degraded image. Suppose that L is the integer which indicates the length of linear motion blur in pixel, and let F belongs to R by N be the matrix corresponding to the original image where N is equal to M plus L minus 1. Then the matrix equation correspond to the blurring due to horizontal motion is given by G transpose is equal to H1 F transpose. Okay. Or G is equal to F into H1 transpose. This is due to horizontal motion, where H1 is the matrix corresponding to horizontal degraded phenomenon. Similarly, matrix form of the process of vertical blurring of image is G is equal to H2F, where H2 is the matrix corresponding to the vertical degradation phenomenon. Let us first consider the case where blurring of columns in the image is independent of blurring of the rows. Then there exist matrices HC and HR such that G is equal to HC into F into HR transpose. Now G is of size M1 by M2, HC is of size M1 by R, HR is of size M2 by N, where N is M2 plus L1 minus 1. Okay. R is M1 plus L2 minus 1. L1 is linear horizontal motion blur in pixel, and L2 is the linear vertical motion blur in pixels. If f and small g denote columns of F and columns of G, respectively, then the relation G is equal to HF is infinitely many exact solutions. So we need an additional criterion for finding the necessary vectors for restoration. Okay, the criterion that we use for the restoration of a blurred image is a minimum distance between measured data, minimum of F tilde minus G in norms, where F tilde is a column vector with the first M elements of F, which is necessary to restore with the following constraints. Norm HF minus G is equal to 0. But then the solution is given by F tilde is equal to H plus, that is the Moore-Penrose inverse of H into G. This is the least square minimum norm solution of the given equation. Okay, that is HF is equal to G. Thus, corresponding to horizontal blurring, the solution for the restored image is F tilde. In fact, we wanted to find F properly. Now we settle with this F tilde given by G into H transpose plus Moore-Penrose inverse of H transpose, or transpose of H plus. Okay, that is equal to H plus transpose. Similarly, in the case of process of virtual blurring, the solution for restored image is f tilde is equal to H plus the Moore-Penrose inverse of H into G. In the case where blurring of columns in the image is independent of blurring of rows, the solution is given by f tilde is equal to Hc plus G into Hr plus transpose. Okay, this is how the Moore-Penrose inverses are used. Now look into an application of Perron's theorems. You must have heard of ATP ranking in case of tennis game. But some mathematicians say that this ATP ranking is not very good. Why? Let us see what is happening in the case of ATP ranking. Each player receives a score of points depending on how far he went on and in which tournament. Okay, the level of the tournament matters. Okay, whether it is a Grand Slam tournament or some other tournament. So depending on the level of the tournament and up to what level he reached, depending on that, a person will be getting a particular score. Suppose you are a player, your points for last 1 year is considered till the event takes place the following year. Okay, it doesn't take into account who is defeated by you. If you win against Federer, is not better than winning against an unknown if it is at the same level of the tournament. So that means the more you participate, the higher rank you get. Okay. If you play lesser number of games, then it is natural that you get lesser number of points and you will have lesser rank. Okay. Now let us consider a particular case and look for an alternative ranking using Perron theorem. Okay. Let us confine to 5 players and how they played each other. Okay. So here is a player 1 and this number explains what is the number of win he had against other players. Okay, player 1 cannot play against himself. Okay, no number. He won just 1 game against player 2, 3 games against player 3, and 2 games against player 4, and he did not win even single game against player 5, and so on. Okay, this is not a symmetric one. Okay. Here you consider a matrix S where ijth entry of S is number of matches I won against J. What is Ni? Number of the games or match a person played may be different from the number of games or match played by the others. For example, number of games played by player 1. How do you get it? Number of games he won plus number of games he lost, isn't it? So that will be given by the entries in the row correspond to him and column correspond to him. So that means the Ni the number of matches played by I is equal to summation Sij plus summation Sji. So J varies, but I not equal to J. So for player 1, we'll have to consider the entries in the first row, 1 plus, add them, 1 plus 3 plus 2, that is 6. The number of games he lost, that is 1. Okay, the 7 is the number of games played by player 1. Similarly, 2. He won 2 plus 1, 3 games and lost 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, 4. That means 3 plus 4, 7 games he played. Okay. In the case of player 4, okay, he won 2, lost 6. Okay, 8 matches he played. Now we construct a matrix A. Okay, that depends on 2 players. ijth entry correspond to ijth of wins of player I. Okay, how many games I won against J divided by number of matches played by I. Okay, that is Sij divided by Ni. So if you write the matrix A, that will be in this particular form. If you look into this carefully, how does it look like? It is irreducible matrix, isn't it? Check carefully. You will be convinced by looking into this particular graph. It is connected. Okay, so what does this indicate? When you look into this arrow, that is with weight 1 by 8. Okay, this is a arrow coming into 4. Okay, so it is 4-1, isn't it? This entry 1 by 8. Okay, this player 4 played 8 many games and won just 1 against player 1. That's what it describes. Okay, similarly, the rest. Now, by considering this matrix and find spectral radius and eigenvector correspond to that. So here spectral radius is 0.4245 and we get right eigenvector associated to this row of A given by 0.6987, 0.3125, 0.3743, 0.3061, 0.4018. Okay, so put these values against players and see which one is highest and which one is the minimum. From Perron-Frobenius theorem, all the entries supposed to be strictly positive. Okay, you don't get zero vector, zero entry. So this vector is strictly positive. Okay, now you take these values and rank them. Okay, 0.698701 is the maximum among all these things, and 0.4018 is next to that, and so on. So you rank this player accordingly. So player 1 will have first rank, and player 5 will have second, and player 3 will have third rank, player 2 will have fourth rank, and player 4 will have 5th rank. In fact, this particular process is patented by Google for documents. Okay, they have used it for page ranking, and this concept is very close to your eigenvector centrality. Okay. Now, this Perron province theory has interesting application in population dynamics too. A standard matrix model of population dynamics is given by a sequence of non-negative vectors x0, x1, and so on of fixed length n defined by xk is equal to p into xk minus 1, where k is 1, 2, and so on. For a given non-zero vector x0, where P is an n by n matrix with non-negative entries, we assume that P is equal to T plus F, where T and F are non-negative, non-zero matrices such that all the column sum of T are not larger than 1. That means summation Tij, I ranging from 1 to n, is less than or equal to 1. J is equal to 1, 2, and so on. N. Okay. Here, the mth entry of vector xk, okay, this particular model, okay, consists of sequence of vectors x0, x, so on. What are these things? This mth entry of vector xk represents the population in the mth class of the time epoch k. Okay, at time step k, what is the population in particular class? You see, in terms of social economy, this different class may represent the people in a particular economic class, maybe income between a particular value, or you say poor, middle class, rich, so and so. You see, as time progresses, depending on maybe policy or because of the environment, okay, their status keep changing time to time. Okay, a poor person may become very rich, and even a rich person may become a middle class fellow after certain time. So at each step, what happens? That will be represented by matrix P. The matrix P, T plus F, is known as the projection matrix. The matrices T and F are known as transition matrix and fertility matrix respectively. Okay. So that ith entry of T represents the fraction of the individuals in the jth class that will survive and move to the ith class in a unit interval of time. The ith entry of F represents number of newborns in the ith class of descent from one individual in the jth class in a unit interval. Because of the demographic interpretation, one sees why the column sums of T are always less than or equal to 1. Here, looking to the actual population or demographic case. So, because of certain reason, the class may keep varying within the society. because of the time effect. At the same time, certain class of people may migrated from outside and join the population of a particular place. So this F appears. Okay. Now let us look into some results which are very useful in the case of population dynamics. Let P be a primitive non-negative matrix with the spectral radius rho of P is equal to R and left and right Perron vectors V transpose and U such that V transpose U is equal to 1. Okay. You have checked earlier. What is the relation between U and V earlier? Okay. You can find V correspond to this U in a typical way. So these two cannot be orthogonal. Okay. V transpose U could be 1. Okay. In such a case, limit as k tend to infinity. What do you mean by that? So as time progresses infinitely, the P by R to the power k, that is 1 by R into the matrix P, that is given by U into V transpose. Okay. Now look at this. How do you interpret this? If R is less than 1, on the right hand side you see it is not at all depending on k or R. Okay. If R is less than 1, now P is again a fixed matrix, isn't it? So if R is less than 1, R to the power k, what happens to it? If it is less than 1, then R to the power k converges to 0. Okay. If R is equal to 1, then R to the power k remains to be 1. If R is greater than 1, what happens? R to the power k converges to infinity. But right hand side remains constant. That is what this theorem says. Okay. Let me come to this matter once again later. Okay. After looking into this particular theorem, the fundamental theorem of demography. Now, P and Xk are as described in the earlier case. P is a projection matrix of a standard population model. Xk, k ranging from 0 to infinity, so on. Suppose that P is primitive with the spectral radius rho of P is equal to R and has left and right Perron vectors V transpose and U respectively. Normalized so that V transpose U is equal to 1. Then limit as k tend to infinity, xk by r to the power k is equal to V transpose into x naught into U. Consequently, if mod W denotes the sum of entries of the vector W, so that mod xk will denote total population at time k in the population model. So if a vector is vector x is given, sum of the entries, modulus of those entries, what does it represent? It is L1 now. Okay, here we are dealing with positive vectors. So here mod W is nothing but norm of this W with reference to L1 norm. Okay, so it is nothing new. So this mod xk denotes the total population at time k in the population model. Then limit mod xk as k tend to infinity, that is equal to 0 if r is less than 1, modulus of v to the v transpose into x naught into u if r is equal to 1 and infinity if r is greater than 1. Look into this expression very carefully. From this only we are interpreting this. Okay. Now, if you say mod xk as k tend to infinity 0 means what? The population evaporates. Nobody will remain in the population. Entire population will be dying. Here, if r is equal to 1, okay, now consider that particular case. If r is less than 1, let us say, make use of that one to interpret this particular expression. When r is less than 1, here denominator part converges to 0, isn't it? And in spite of that, limit of this quotient converges to some constant matrix. When does that happen? Just try to recall your L'Hospital rule. So denominator converges to 0 and this quotient converges to some constant. That is possible only when numerator also converges to 0. It should be in indeterminate form. Okay, so that is how we determine that if r is less than 1, the population, total population will be 0 after infinite step of time. If r is equal to 1, so what happens? Denominator is constant 1. So xk converges to v transpose x naught u. So it is simply modulus of. So population becomes stable, constant after certain time. As time progresses, okay, the population becomes stable. If r is greater than 1, this limit of this quotient still remains to be constant. That is possible only when this is in indeterminate form. That means this xk must converges to infinity. That means the population given by mod xk explodes. Okay, so if it is anything to do with the number of people, so there won't be space on this earth to stay. So population explodes if r is greater than 1. So depending on the model, by looking into this r, you can see what happens to the population as time progresses. Okay, so you can find what will be the population after certain particular step of time, and this particular theory is applicable for making several models for the ongoing epidemic COVID also. In fact, you will have an interesting talk by Professor Arup Bose from ISI Kolkata. He will be delivering this talk in upcoming ILAPS 2020. So you may give even you may get even more input from him related to this particular model. And I use these references. Okay. For linear algebra and linear model, I use a book by Ravindra Bapat published in 2012 and a book written by Bapat as well as Raghavan. Sorry, there is a spelling error. It should have been R instead of T. Okay. Bapat and Raghavan have written a book on non-negative matrices and application. That is a good reference for any input taken on non-negative matrices appearing here in connection with the Perron's theorem. Okay. Kenneth Cutler has written linear algebra, textbook on linear algebra. This consists of an interesting number of applications. Similarly, there is a paper by Chi-Kwang Lee and Hans Schneider. Okay. That is published in Journal of Mathematical Biology with the title Applications of Perron-Frobenius Theory to Population Dynamics. So there is a reference by Igor Sozanovic and other, Predak Stanimorovic, and there is one more author, Zoran Zlataev. Okay. They have written an article on applications of Moore-Penrose inverse of matrix in the image deblurring. So these are quite interesting references I like to put before you. And again, let me thank Department of Mathematics and Dr. Sudhakara for giving this opportunity. And you can be in touch with me for any clarification or to get more input on this particular topic. Goodbye.